One of the things I want to do with this assignment is I want to show you a different way to export images out of Lightroom and to begin working with them in Photoshop. Everybody likes to have a workflow that is specific to what they're doing, and I'm just going to show you a little bit different way to get your images out of Lightroom and into Photoshop. Now, what we had done before was we selected an image, right-click on it, go to Edit in Photoshop, or open as Smart Object in Photoshop. And the beauty of, particularly of opening as a Smart Object in Photoshop, as you well know, is that you can do your raw adjustments in Photoshop. One of the downsides to either of these two methods is that it always links back to Lightroom. Whatever you do in Photoshop, even if you hit Save As, it's going to save a copy in Lightroom also. Now that might be good, but if that's something you don't want, then I'm going to show you another way to export your images. So let's go in here, and I'm going to select these two images that these are from a trip with my son and his Boy Scout troop to the Bahamas. And anyway, so I'm going to go down to File, Export. Oh, first, do all your heavy edits here in Lightroom. You know, adjust your lightness, darkness, whatever you want, color balance, because right here you're working with the raw file. When we take them in as Photoshop files, we've got a little bit less flexibility than we've got in here. So let's do our edits, and then we select the two images, go to File, Export, or just click Export down here at the bottom. Now, you get this panel that shows up, and it's going to ask you some different questions about how you want to export these files. One is, where do you want to export them to? So you can choose a folder. In this case, I named a specific folder called Assignment 2. And I've already got a couple images there, but I'm going to overwrite those. Existing files, ask what to do. I've already got the exact same two files in there, so because I did a little practice, so I'm going to say overwrite without warning. You don't necessarily want to do that, maybe. You might leave ask what to do. In fact, I'll do that. Ask what to do is always better. File naming. Rename to, I'm not going to rename them. They're not videos. File settings. This is very important here. You've got several options. You could export your images as JPEGs, TIFFs, DNG, which is a raw format, or original. And original is going to be a raw format, or however you have the images in Lightroom. In this assignment, I want you to select PSD for Photoshop document. It's a Photoshop file. Color space, I prefer ProPhoto RGB. If your images, but you could choose some of these other images depending upon what you're using them for. Select 16 bits. That gives us a little more flexibility than if we were working with 8-bit images. Image sizing, make sure that is unchecked. Sharpening, unchecked. Metadata, save all metadata. It's always good. Unless there's a specific reason why you don't want any metadata, you don't want anybody else to know about where you shot them, how you shot them, things like that. No watermark. Now, post-processing. You could say do nothing, show in Finder, which is going to show it in the, which is like Windows Explorer. It's going to show where the files are. That's going to open up. I could open up in Adobe Photoshop, or I could open up in another application. So this is what's going to happen after the exporting is done. So keep things simple. I'm just going to go ahead and have them open up in Photoshop. They're going to export them into that folder, save them in that folder, and then open them up in Photoshop. all at the same time. Hit export, and there it's found the two images that I've already got there, the same name and everything. So I'm going to say overwrite those files. Now I'm on my laptop and it doesn't like it when I have Lightroom and Photoshop open at the same time, so it's going to take a minute or two here. So here we go, and they're the pictures, and that's what it looks like being on a boat for 7 days with 11 14-year-old boys. All right, so anyway, now I don't want to do that. Now I'm going to take this image. I'll just work with this image as an example. I want you to work with a couple of different tools here. I want you to work with color range selection. We're going to work with the curves adjustment panel, and we're going to work with hue saturation adjustment panel. Okay, first off, I'm going to start off with the curves adjustment panel. Go over to my adjustment panel, click on that. Go down to curves right here. And click on that, and notice as soon as I click on that, I automatically get a layer, an adjustment layer opened up. There are a couple of other ways to create that adjustment layer. You could go down here to what they call the yin yang button, and you could click on that, and then you get all your adjustments here, and I could create a curves adjustment layer. Yeah, it created another one for me. I could also go up here to my layer drop down, and I go down here, I go new adjustment layer, go over here to curves. Yep, and it's going to ask me if I want to name it something different. Say OK, gives me a whole nother adjustment layer. This is what you do not want to do. You do not want to I'm going to go back up, throw these away. Let's say I just opened up that image. You do not want to go up here and go to Image, Adjustments, Curves. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to work on my curves. I'm going to say OK. And I'll go, so wait a second, I never got my layer. Where did my adjustment layer go? Well, there never was one, because I went to Image, Adjustments, and I told it exactly what to do. If I was going to go up here, I want to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then Curves. So now what I've done is I've baked in my adjustments into the background layer. They're in there forever. Fortunately, I've got my history palette here, and I can just go back one step. But if I didn't have that, then I wouldn't be able to change anything again. The whole advantage of working with these adjustment layers is that we can go back in and undo or make any changes at any point. All right, so I'm going to go over here. The simplest way is go to the adjustment panel, click on my curves layer, and there's my curves adjustment panel. Click in the middle, I can lighten, I can darken. If I don't like what I've done, I can take this, I can drag it off of the screen, and it disappears. Another way to undo my changes is to go down here to the back arrow button and click it. I can go over here to this little hand button. Click on that, and if I want to lighten up this area, I could click and drag up. Notice what happens to the curve. It's just all it's done is it's put a little point that corresponds to that tonal value over here. It's going to affect the whole image. As you can see from that curve, it's affecting the entire image, but it's mainly taken from the adjustment that I did in that tonal area. Undo that. We also have these eyedroppers here. Now these eyedroppers are kind of interesting. I can decide if there's something in the image that I want to be white, pure white with no detail. Click on the eyedropper and I can go into my image and I could say I want to make that white over there. And notice what it did. It took the RGB layer, which is that big white line, and you can barely see it, but it adjusted it just a little bit. But what's interesting is it took the red, green, and blue layers and it adjusted them so that this area is neutral. It's not a particular color. I could also, there's the middle button here, I could use this to make anything gray. Like if I decided this should be gray back here, I can click on this. And I'm going to reset that so you can see a little bit more dramatic change. On that neutral eyedropper, click on there, and did you see that? It was just a subtle color change because this is kind of neutral anyway. Let me take a more drastic change. Let's say if I wanted to make his shirt, set my neutral point on a shirt, which would be a really bad idea, it's going to change the overall color of the image. So these eyedroppers are really for as a kind of a way, think of it as setting your color temperature. It's finding a neutral white, a neutral black, or a neutral gray in your image as a way of finding a good middle point in your color. Okay. Down here we got edit points to modify the curve. So there's a couple of different ways you can work with the curves. You've got it here where you can work with curves, and this is what I recommend you use. There's also this pencil here. You could do it here, and I can actually go in here and draw a curve if I wanted to. I particularly don't recommend you do that, as you can see, right now. It takes a little bit of experience to be able to work with this comfortably. If you did want to try that pencil, and that's fine, there's a little tool down right below it that'll help smooth that curve out for you. And you can go in here and click that a couple of times. Every time it smooths it out more and more. But generally, I would just recommend working with the flexible curve portion of this adjustment. All right. Now, up here, we've got RGB, which is represented as a white line, and it's showing the curve of the red, green, and blue channels all together. On the left-hand side are our shadows. On the right-hand side are our highlights. And the higher up this histogram is, see that histogram in the background? The higher up it is, that means there's more information in that tonal value. So if I have a tonal value way over here, I've got very little information in that tonal value. But I get over here in the darker areas, and I've got a lot of information up in there. All right. So I'm going to clear off of that. Now, let me show you what I want to do with this image. Remember I talked about a white and a black point. And this is very important, and you should always look for this in one of your images. It's having a good white and a good black. There are several ways to do this in Photoshop, like there is to do almost anything. And I think the easiest way to do it is to go over here in your curves panel. See the little triangle at the bottom left, and you got a little triangle at the bottom right. I'm going to take the one on the left. I'm going to click and hold the Option key. On the PC, it would be the Alt key. And now, while I'm holding down that key, I'm going to click on the little triangle. And I'm going to drag it to the right some. See, it's all the way to the left. And now what it's going to do is it's going to show me where my shadows are clipping. I want to get a little bit of clipping in my shadows. I want to get some good blacks. In order to do that, I'm going to need to clip them just a little bit. So I'm going to drag it to the right so I just see a little bit come in, and I'm probably going to stop right there. So now I've made sure and I've got a good black up in some of those areas. I'm going to go on the right-hand side. I'm going to hold down that Option key, click on the triangle, and still holding the Option key. I'm going to drag this to the left, and see I'm getting some areas coming in that are showing some all white. And I think I'm going to stop right there. So notice I picked areas that I didn't have a lot of important detail. I'm going to go back here. I would never want to go as far as this, because now I'm losing detail in his face. That's more important detail. I really don't care about the detail in the window, but I want to have a bright white in my final image. So, and I'm going to let some of it looks like some of his eye is going white too there. So, anyway, I think that'd be a good white point set. Now I can still take the middle of this curve and I can drag it up or down if I want to lighten or darken the image. And I'm still, even if I lighten this or darken this, I'm not affecting my white and my black points. They're still there. So I'm going to pick something like that, lighten it up just a little bit. There. Now, I'm thinking that his skin looks a little greenish, just a little bit. So I want to change some of the color here. I'm going to go down to my green channel on this adjustment layer. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to click on a little dot. And I'm going to go and I'm going to drag this down just a little bit. I'm going to drag it down a lot so you can see what it's doing. If I drag it down a lot, it gets magenta, because magenta is the opposite of green. I drag it up, it gets more green. So I'm going to go drag it down just a little bit, just a tiny bit of magenta in his face. And I could even, if I have that little pin highlighted, I can use the arrow key to go down if I want to make some really fine-tuned adjustments. So there, I think that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit of yellow would help. So I'm going to go to the blue. Again, I'm going to click there. And I'm going to drag down just a touch. Put a little bit of yellow in his skin too. I think that'd be good. There, I think that's looking pretty good. All right. So there I've got my my lightness and darkness adjusted. I've got my white point. I've got my black point. I think it's looking pretty good for overall color, overall contrast, and tone. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you another adjustment layer. I'm going to go over here to hue saturation. I'm going to click on that. And in here, I can change, reduce the saturation of the color, increase it. Woo, crazy. Now, I could also work with this. I rarely use this. I don't really understand what it's doing, because you can lighten the image and it desaturates it. You can darken the image and it desaturates it. It just really doesn't seem to have a whole lot of purpose in there. But nevertheless, it's there. Hue saturation, I can alter the hue, so I can shift the whole hue of the image in one direction or another. Different than the saturation. See that was with the hue, and see what the saturation does. You can play around with it. You can see what I'm talking about. So this is set up for master right now. So this is affecting the whole image, all the colors, but I could specify a specific color. Now let's say if I want to just affect his shirt, I could go into, let's say it's orange, but is that red? I think so. Maybe it's red. You know, maybe Photoshop thinks it's red. But I'm not really sure, so let me make sure I know Photoshop knows exactly what color I'm talking about. I'm going to go into my eyedropper here. I'm going to sample some of that color. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper, and I'm going to go down here and I'm going to click on his shirt. And all I really need to do is click once. And then, but I want to sample some more of his shirt. And I want to get that lanyard too, so I'm going to hit the plus key, the plus eyedropper. Sorry, not the plus key, but the plus eyedropper. And I'm going to go and sample different parts of his shirt. So I'm just going to click all over his shirt. Okay, there. And now you can see, if you look at this little diagram here, it shows you the area that we're going to sample. And if you watch one of the videos, you'll see one of the guys, he shows you how you can drag some of these things up. In the center is where it's going to be 100% effective, and in the edges here, it's going to be it's going to feather it. And I'm going to actually drag those in a little bit because I don't care if it feathers it that much, because I really want to get just the shirt and not really bleed over that much. So now I'm going to do this, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to move the hue saturation, and let's see what happens. Yeah, I just turned his shirt yellow. Pretty cool. But wait a second. Let me look here. Now, notice that I've done his shirt, but there's also a lot of other parts of the image that I've done. So Photoshop really didn't do exactly what I wanted to do. So I may need to go and select the exact area that I want to perform this adjustment in. So I'm going to take this adjustment. I'm just going to turn it off for now. I could throw it away. I'll just turn it off for right now. And I'm going to go up to this tool called Color Range. And I want you to do this in the assignment. Go to Color Range. And I'm going to sample colors. You can actually pick colors, but really, picking shadows, midtones, and highlights can sometimes be very effective. But most of the time, you're just going to sample colors here. And I'm going to go make sure my eyedropper is selected there. I'm going to go into the image, and I'm going to click it once. And then I'm going to the plus eyedropper, and I'm going to go and click a bunch of times. Okay, got that. Now I can adjust my fuzziness, and I can sort of see what areas are being affected and what aren't. And I'm going to pick something where I get mostly his shirt. I can't really help it if it bleeds over, but I think that's pretty good selection there. There's this button up here that says Localize Color Clusters. If I don't check that, what's happening is it's going to pick up other areas of the image with that same, roughly that same color. But I want to pick colors that are next to each other, which means localized color clusters. So it's going to pick everything pretty much close to right where I sampled. All right. Detect faces doesn't work that well. You can try it, but I don't find it works that well. Hit OK. My Photoshop's going to do a little work here. All right. So, okay. The mistake I made there was I had my mask highlighted while I did that. So it automatically incorporated my color range into the mask. All right. So one step I forgot to mention, I'm going to go back, make sure your background layer is selected. Go into Select, Color Range. I've still got my same settings. Good. Hit OK. And I'll show you why it's important that you do it this way. Now I've got my marching ants. Now I can see exactly what I've selected. Because you remember the first time I did this in hue saturation, you can't see what you're working with. Whereas when I go into the color range selection tool, I can see exactly what areas I'm working with, and I can still alter it. So I can alter the selection. I'm going to go to my lasso tool, which I already have selected. And there's new lasso. There's add to lasso, but I want subtract from selection. Not add to lasso, add to selection. I want to subtract from my selection. So I'm going to go in here now, and I'm just going to lasso up these areas that I don't want in my selection and get them out of there. And right there. And get close to a shirt a little bit, gets a little tricky. All right, so there we go. Still not perfect. I could probably work on the selection some more. and we're going to learn more about selections in the next class and practice that for the next homework assignment. But there's a lot that you can do in there, so I'm not going to spend all the time in this video to do that. I'm just going to go with what selection I've got. Now I'm going to go up here to my adjustments panel, and I'm going to click on hue saturation. Now what's really neat is that, okay, my selection's gone, my marching ants have disappeared, but if you notice, there's my mask, and it's baked in my selection into that mask. So that was really cool. Now I'm going to go in here and I'm going to adjust the hue saturation. If you notice, I'm getting his shirt yellow, but not his face. I'm going to click it on and off so you can see. So I don't need this anymore. This is my old adjustment layer. I'm going to throw that away. And there. I think we're done. So I will upload this image to Canvas. If you want to work with exactly the same image, you can. And but I would like you to pick 2 images, and feel free to do as many adjustment layers as you want. Practice is how we're learning with this homework, so the more practice you do, the better. I want you to upload 2 images, and we're going to go through the homework pretty quickly next time because I think there's a lot of information that we all want to learn. Now, the beauty about having the workflow the way I did, where we export to a folder, these files are already saved in that folder. So let's say I've made some adjustments here, and just so we can see this happen, I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to make a quick little adjustment. Got some blown out highlights in here, but I'll darken it down a little bit. Maybe increase some color saturation a little bit, but I might want to decrease a little bit in the reds and those faces. Bring down my saturation there just a touch. So there we go. All right, so I'm going to take these 2 images. So now imagine I've got a whole bunch of images open, maybe even 5, 6, 10, or 200. I go in here to File. Now I go to Close All. And look, make sure and click Apply to All. Very important there. And I go Save. And that's it. Maximize compatibility, yes. Okay. Now, if I had 200 images open, it would save them all. I can go have lunch or whatever while it's saving those images. So I don't have to go to one image at a time and hit Save As now. This is primarily the advantage to working this way if you have a lot of images to work with. Anyway, so that's saving to that folder, and well, I want you to upload the images to Canvas, and I'm going to show you. I'm going to go back to that folder here, assignment number 2, raw image, and modify it at 635, and that sounds exactly right. So those are my new images saved, and I didn't have to go through each one and hit Save As. So now upload those to Canvas, and if you have any troubles with uploading to Canvas, make sure you don't have any images that are stored there that should be deleted, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.